Hey, hi. Well, let's see how this goes. I've got the latest piece of technology, a chalkboard. Anyway, welcome. Today I'm going to run through some of the basics of photography from the beginning of perception in human beings. I'll start there. How's that? And we'll go through pretty quick. First thing is, who knows something about light? Well, I'll answer that because that's definitely rhetorical. Light is a form of energy. And as my junior high science teacher, Mr. Tennyson, said, energy is the ability to do work. I've held that with me since that great man taught me a lot of stuff. Anyway, so we have light as a form of energy. Energy can change things. That's work. What else do we know about light besides beer? I mean, not light beer. I mean, I'm talking, what am I thinking about? Light travels in not an Uber, a straight line. Now, there's a lot of conditions with this. There's a lot, but for our practical purposes, light travels in a straight line in a consistent medium. Mostly for us, that's air. Out in space, it's a vacuum. Gravity affects light, different media as it goes through the heat waves over the freeway or over the blacktop in the middle of the desert. You'll see the light waving because the density of the air is actually changing. But for our purposes, let's start with light travels in a straight line. Okay, I'm not going to go all the way back to our primate ancestors, but sometime around the time of the early Greek civilization, something a couple hundred BC. They knew this. In fact, I'll dare say that photography wasn't invented, it was discovered. It's a principle that exists by the nature of light and by the nature of space. I have been sitting in a lecture with a fairly boring slide lecture back in the day of slide lectures, darkened room with a hole in the blackout curtain. And through that hole, the light from the outside, Phoenix or Tempe, Arizona, was coming in through that little hole, and it was doing something very interesting. Let me show you what that was. Let's see if we can do this. I'll make the room into a box. Here's the little hole. Let's say that this is the back of the box. I'll do a little bit of... And out here, let's say, we've got someone standing. Oh, not bad. Now the light from the sun, which has been around for a long time, hits our subject, let's say right on the nose, sends a photon down to the nose. What options does that photon have when it hits our person in the nose? Well, first thing it can do is heat up the nose. The photon can turn into heat energy and warm the nose. The second is it can bounce off. It can be reflected. And I'm not going to go into the details of different types of reflections and refractions, but it can come off of that nose and pretty much in any direction away from the nose that it can travel. So the light bouncing on the nose, one photon maybe goes back up into outer space. One photon from that nose that hits the very same spot goes down to the ground, hits our box. But one of these lucky photons goes right through our little hole and lights up a little area of the backside of the box. Another, let's give him some shoes, or her some shoes, I'm not sure. Another photon comes down and hits the toe of the shoe. It bounces, can run into all kinds of other things, but let's say one of these photons goes through the hole and lights up the inside of the box. That is true for pretty much every part of this person which is facing the box or the hole in the box. So each area of our hero here can reflect a photon that goes through the hole and lands on the box. So let's sort of connect all the dots. Here's the shoes, here's the legs, here's the garment. Oops, I'm going to miss the nose here. Oops. Here's the face, there's the nose, there's the smile, there's the eyeball. Okay, what do you notice about our little friend here? First thing is that he or she is upside down. Okay. Second is, she's or he is made out of light. That's kind of interesting. If this box was big enough I could stand in it, and I wasn't blocking the light, I could see, there on the wall, the person outside, upside down, backwards, left to right, and moving, because in real time, as he or she moves, so will this image. So this was known by people for years. Aristotle played with these things. The effect was fairly common knowledge. The effect is also incredibly temporary. As soon as the sun goes down, or the hole gets stopped up, or something else changes, the image goes away. There was no way to make it permanent. So this effect was known through the time of the Renaissance, when things started to change a lot in Europe, particularly in Italy. This was known as a camera obscura, if anyone's got some Italian in them. Camera meaning room, obscura meaning black or dark. So this was a dark room with a little hole, and you could make pictures. Curious, interesting, but that's where it stopped. But along comes the Renaissance. And from Turkey, along comes from some glassmakers from Constantinople. At the fall of Constantinople, they landed in Italy and began making glass in Venice. Now, to make glass in Venice, you used a lot of fire. To make glass at all, you used a lot of heat. So the Venetians asked them to move off into an island in the surrounded by water. Now, glass, up until the Renaissance, I didn't know this, was never transparent, clear. It was always cloudy. I thought just because those things that the Egyptians and the Phoenicians made that I saw at the museums were just old, and therefore they were cloudy. But glass was not clear. Happens that on this island, these Turks who were making glass, excellent glassmakers, were using I think it's phosphorus or something that adds to the glass, that was coming, they used a seaweed or something that grew around the island to give this phosphorus to somehow help the glass do whatever it had to do to melt and to form. Lo and behold, the glass that they started making was transparent, like water, like clear ice. This had never been seen. And because it's a different density than air, it bends light. This is a pretty amazing thing. So, the first thing, I don't know if it's the first thing, but eventually, and it didn't take very long, they started using this glass and grinding it into a very specific shape. Let's get rid of that. That did this amazing thing. It magnified. It also did another thing that wasn't perhaps quite so obvious, but one of the most versatile things that it allowed was old scholars to continue with their scholarly pursuits, because after a certain point, most people's eyes get a little bit more distance in the focusing. And with the glasses, older scholars whose inability to read small print was fading, and they're getting out of the loop, allowed them to continue reading the texts. This is amazing. This is really important. So anyway, what else? Let's see. My aunt once gave me, there's our son, a magnifying glass, a pretty big magnifying glass. She was an amazing woman. She always gave me stuff that pitched just a little bit over my head. Anyway, our glass does something really interesting. Magnifying glass takes all the rays of the sun that are landing on this surface, and it bends them back down to a point. Now, that point may be in space where you may not see it, but if you, confession time, if you focus that little light on an insect when you're 7, come on, no one tells you, the energy from all those rays, all these photons, are concentrated back to a point where not only is it a very small point, but it concentrates all the energy of the light there. And, so I went around to burn my initials into the picnic table, and that seemed to be, my father was like, okay with that, I guess. Anyway, so what people did very quickly was to, they put 2 of these lenses together And you can make a telescope, and you can see your enemies coming at you and their ship, and you can fire your cannon first. Or you can put one of these lenses in your camera obscura, and concentrate the light from one point. You take several rays, many rays, virtual infinity of rays of photons, and concentrate them back down to a point here where it's a very, very, very bright point. You do the same thing, of course, with all the other points of this body. And because you're concentrating these rays at the point where they naturally come together. If you don't have your back at the right spot, those rays will just cross through each other, and instead of having a point, you'll have a circle, and you will have a very out of focus image. We've all done this. Anyway, the camera obscura was suddenly a much more versatile tool because the image was so much more bright, and you didn't have to stand inside of it to look at it. You would take the back off of this, put on a piece of parchment, pounded animal skin, pounded so thin that it was actually sort of translucent, like wax paper or something like that, tissue. And you could stand on the outside and you could draw. You could draw a picture that you saw on the back of this camera obscura. Now, the cool thing about this, besides a neat way to be able to draw, is that it, unlike pre-camera painting, this showed artists' perspective. And there was one rule of perspective that leads to all the other rules of perspective, so-called rules, is that if something is at twice the distance, it appears half the size. So here's our close person, and here is our further away person. Half the size, twice the distance, half the size. And I'm not going to go into this, but that basically leads to all of the other rules of perspective, which is what the camera shows us anyway. It's how the camera works, but it's not how the brain works. So it was a revelation. And it now is so common, it's now so standard since the 1500s, that it is, oh, of course, that's natural. That's the way the world looks in perspective. Well, it never has, because our brains are this incredible piece of software. They keep rearranging what our eyes have been showing us. Our eyes are essentially a camera obscura with a lens and everything like that. But they send messages to our brain, which does all kinds of things to reinterpret that signal. So this way it was fixed. You could actually see it on the back of the camera. You could trace it, you could draw it, you could use the same ideas in your painting, and it changed the way the West saw the world. And pretty much has stayed the same until Picasso and Braque and people said, oh, yes, that's nice, but we're going to show you the world from 5 different points of view at the same time, and Cubism was born. And we've taken it from there in the 20th and 21st century. Anyway, I'm running out of time. This box is pretty much the same as your camera, no matter how modern and how electronic and how digitized it is. It does the same thing as this. And I'm going to come back and talk about what that is on the next reel. Questions? What? I love this. My friend Mario Biagioli, who studied perspective, said, he quoted someone from the Renaissance as the camera's being developed, and he said, well, the eye is alike of the camera, but the camera is different from the eye because the camera sees upside down and the eye sees right side up. No, it's just flipped in your brain back to right side up. Your back of your retina shows the image upside down, just like the camera obscura. So thank you so much. I will talk to you later. Bye.